it's kind of like a drug, love.
Yeah.
So people wanted more. Makes sense.
But why not have that love with more than one person throughout? And you said our lifespan is
more than cars. I didn't know you were like
our
that.
lifespan is getting longer. You said so. Do you really want to spend the next 200 years with the same person?
Yeah, legal entanglements as well. Hussein, you're gonna tie yourself down one little nest.
She's the right person, you know. If someone, whoever's watching right now, she's the right person.
Welcome to Flipside, the podcast where we bring you lighthearted, good-natured debates about a variety of interesting topics ranging from politics to social and cultural issues. We make a genuine effort to explore all sides of each issue, and the goal is always to find common ground instead of scoring points against each other. This is Pri.
Carson.
This is Hussein.
And this is Julian.
So today we're talking about marriage and children, basically. So marriage and family is the bedrock of society, and it's an ancient institution that's been practiced and passed down through almost every society since the dawn of civilization, basically. So it's a important topic, important for us young men, and
as we're growing up,
right? So we're gonna take some time to talk about stuff like, is marriage even worth it today due to the risks of getting involved with that institution for men and also women, although obviously we can't speak to that as much.
Yeah, that's true.
And also some alternative marriage types that are becoming more
popular,
relevant these days. And then talking about the demographics and trends that we're seeing with people getting divorced more, married less, and older, and having fewer kids. So
as children, yeah, 100%.
Okay, so do y'all have some trends for us for marriage today and what's been happening?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it briefly. Like I said, marriage rates are like decreasing. People are tending to not get married younger. It's getting more older. Like some stats I saw is that the average man or getting married is at the age of 30, while for the women it's like 28. Well, before it was like 26 and 24. Yeah. So yeah, it's a huge difference, right? Yeah, basically, higher studies. Both the men and the women want to pursue their interests, so they're just delaying it.
Yeah, that's part of the reason. But you also have to remember that these statistics are unique to a developed country like the US. Other parts of the world, the trends are a little different. So
I agree, but I think in general it's similar though, right? As a society, when you move from one grade of a country to the next one, it's similar trends, right?
Right. But specifically, we're looking at the US here, right? With these statistics. Yeah. So I just want to make that clear.
Okay, yeah, 100%.
So what are the factors that are leading to this decreasing rates?
Well, it's like you said, people pursuing education and entering the labor force. A lot of it also is because of the empowerment of women. So that
hell yeah,
coming into the
Go
21st
women
century, that's obviously going to play a role. So yeah, I think another part of it that I was reading as well is, especially in other countries like in Asia, for instance, like Korea and Japan, it's like living costs are just becoming so high. Well, especially parts of the US as well. Living costs are becoming so high that both people need to work, and it's harder to afford a child whenever it's like a younger couple.
Yeah.
So that's another part of it, because education is also becoming much more expensive in parts of the world. So
some of this stuff is more relevant for the statistics around having children, which that'll be the second part of this video.
Yeah.
As far as as far as marriage goes,
I think we should establish first what's good about marriage. I think we should start off with that, right?
Pros and cons.
Yeah, pros and cons.
Yeah. And I was just gonna say, as far as trends go, it does seem like as a society we're just moving away from that. It seems there's like this sort of idea that it's an outdated institution, and gradually people are getting more disillusioned with it. Obviously the vast majority of people still intend to be married, but that's changing. And a lot of the economic factors around children we'll get into later.
Okay. Well, yeah, the stuff that I just think in general, and I think is the basic stuff of marriage, is I think companionship people like being with somebody else. They don't like being alone, so they have emotional support and a sense of belonging. Basically, I think that makes sense. Because I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my life just by myself, alone. So like, it makes sense that I'd want someone with me.
Yeah, and our lives are getting longer.
Yeah,
exactly. Lifespan's a bit longer, so kind of makes sense to have that somebody by your side. There's the emotional type of, people want to get emotionally invested because it's kind of like a drug, love. Yeah. So people want it more. Makes sense.
But why not have that love with more than one person throughout? And you said our lifespan is
more than cars. I didn't know you were like that.
Our lifespan is getting longer. You said so. Do you really want to spend the next 200 years with the same person?
Yeah, legal entanglements as well. Hussein, you're going to tie yourself down one little nest.
If she's the right person, if someone, whoever's watching right now, if she's the right person, then I would love to spend 200, 500 years with her.
Facts. I agree with that.
My wife is watching this podcast as we speak.
Hopefully, hopefully, man.
Hopefully my future wife isn't watching.
Is it watching? That's I agree with you. Well, I mean, you were saying like the drug of love, like you said.
Yeah, I mean,
something you've dabbled a lot with.
I focus on my studies and all, like as my parents say.
Okay, so but all right. I think he's getting a little too ahead of himself here.
Okay, but actually, do y'all have a counter for that? Like the whole point of marriage is being in one committed relationship, like for life. Like you shackle yourself to this person and you say, "I will be with you until I die." That seems a bit extreme, right?
Well, shackle is like a weird way, a wrong way of framing it. It's not really shackle. It's more like, because you're not really being forced to, I mean, at least for most marriages, you're not really being forced to, against your will, like a gun to your head, marry this person, live by them.
You're willingly shackling yourself to them.
Yeah, well, willingly, you're connecting with them for a while.
Yeah.
And so that's why
the rest of your life is the point of it.
Well, I guess, I don't know. Have you ever dated anyone, Carson?
Why is that relevant?
Well, because it's important.
You don't have to bring that up right now.
It's very important to recognize the value connection has, and why people get married is because
I'm trying to bring out the good parts of marriage by proposing the opposite point of view. So
okay, let me ask you
putting
this,
everybody
Hussein.
on the spot in the beginning.
Let me ask you this, Hussein. So marriage in itself, if you think about it, is just a legal practice that we've established around two people having a partnership. That's all marriage is. Marriage is a document you have to sign, right?
No, that's not. That's like the legal marriage. That's the government part of marriage. But marriage, I'm talking about marriage as in, that's an aspect. Like, having that. It's important to have that legal document because of like, trouble you could get into later or something like that. Like, it's important that we've established that. But more so, the marriage I'm talking about is like between two people, not like between two people.
Like what constitutes you being married? Like,
there's
two people in a relationship, and then at one point they're married. Like, where's that point?
Well, for me, marriage is more of. Well, there's also the religious aspect of marriage. That adds value.
Exactly. Okay.
That adds value to marriage because you're connecting yourself between two people and then with God as well, or gods if you believe in multiple gods. So that's like that's the reason why I feel like a lot of people get married, is because it's kind of it's this very rich connection that it adds a richer connection to your life with this one person. So
I mean, let's think about it though. Like a lot of cultures, I mean, maybe Mexican and Mexican cultures especially, it's like you get married with a priest, right? There is that religious connection there.
You get married with a priest?
Yeah, a priest does the ceremony.
Oh, I thought you meant you get married to the priest. Sorry.
No. Hussein.
I was like, okay, I don't know. Okay.
Well, yeah, but the actual ritual is done. So there is like, even if you're not religious, a lot of people sort of get married with priests, I'd imagine, right? Because it's just like
it's tradition.
Exactly, it's just become tradition at this point. Right, so we've established that there's a legal practice, and then there's also a religious practice that we built around it. But I mean, besides those two, what is marriage?
There's also a the personal aspect of it. Because
but where does that like start? Like, what distinguishes that just from a relationship you've had previously?
I think the terminology marriage makes it more real. You have commitment. You're signifying the commitment more. It's not just a legal construct. It's a construct between two people.
Well, it's a construct that we've built around
I agree. I'm just saying it doesn't have to just be legal.
Yeah.
So the difference there is a reason why instead of just running around with a bunch of different women, like you might think, or men, you might think right away that, or your initial impression maybe is people's relationships often end, like how is it going to end up lasting 60, 80 years? That seems like way too long to be with the person. Why not just not have that level of commitment? So that is the difference between marriage and just a long-term relationship per se. And I think there's some benefits to that. So first of all, even a committed relationship is different from marriage, I think, because when you get married, you're like standing up, you're spending $30,000 on this giant celebration, standing up in front of God and all your friends and family. People invite like hundreds and hundreds of people to their weddings. And then it's like this official announcement to everyone that you are devoting your life to this other person. You give your marriage vows. Like, I'm pretty sure the ancient practices were like giving your vows in front of the whole community so that they can hold you to those.
It makes it more real. That's basically what it is.
Right. Yeah. So some benefits of this long-term commitment, obviously we have divorce now, but and we've been more lenient with that as time has gone on, but that's still like worst case scenario.
Right.
So if you have someone that can't run away from you no matter what, then you can
That doesn't sound that
right. But still, I'll continue on with that. That means you can be more vulnerable to them, more honest, because you know that they're like, you can really show them your whole self because you know that they've committed to loving you.
Right.
And that just gives you a lot more freedom versus someone like say if you're in a long-term relationship cohabitating but not actually getting the certificate of marriage, then what's stopping them from just walking out after one fight basically? But marriage is a lot of work, and once you establish that commitment, it forces you to go the extra mile to make the relationship work.
Yeah, I think it's, compromise and sacrifice. That's the two biggest things in marriage, in my opinion. You got to learn to do that, and it helps you learn to do that. And it not only helps you in the relationship, it teaches you stuff in just life in general, in my opinion. That's why relationships are very important.
I've got a couple more just benefits of marriage, and then we can go to divorce, and that goes along with just
risks,
negatives and risks of marriage. So marriage has legal benefits, like it makes you a single taxable unit, you get inheritance rights, share Medicare and welfare benefits, and then there's like decision making benefits in general with being paired with somebody else. They're on average have a higher net worth, married couples versus single ones. Happily wed adults live longer because they have more stability in their lives. That's one among many reasons, I'm sure. There's social benefits like meeting people and relating to your friends and other reasons like that. And then children is a big one, which is why we're spending that as another part of in this same topic. Children need to be in a stable environment with two people versus if you're going to have a bunch of long-term relationships with people throughout your whole life, that's not a good environment to raise children. So yeah, I think that covers all the positives unless y'all want to add or dispute any of that.
No, I think we covered that. Yeah. We can move on to the risks and divorce rates, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what are the negatives of marriage?
It's kind of hard to say, but I think like what Carson said before, people feel shackled to it. I think that's one of the biggest thing. They feel like even financially, like you think it's too much of a burden on you, or like loss of independence. You can't do things that you want by yourself. I think that's what I meant in beforehand, and I think that's a huge reason why they feel like either the other person is forcing them, or the other person has too much influence on their decisions. I think that's one of the big reasons.
So I guess those type of people aren't willing to compromise or sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly. But which can also be good, because sometimes you don't need to compromise and sacrifice, right? Because the other person isn't always necessarily right. So for yourself, for your own wellness, sometimes you got to move away.
Yeah. Well, people who usually get married, they I guess you're trying to work on something in marriage, so you're trying to build something with that partner. And people who I guess aren't willing to compromise or sacrifice, or believe they shouldn't, I guess they're not willing to actually build anything with that other person, rather than they'd just rather build themselves.
Or
so
they think
it's
that
a selfless or selfish,
a little bit, but also
view.
maybe they think it's not worth it anymore. Like they don't think it's going to head anywhere.
Yeah,
I think
their own values, their own beliefs. Yeah, makes sense.
I think that's one of the biggest ones for sure. And the other big one is definitely obviously conflicts. When conflicts arise, you can't get past it sometimes, right? Not always can you compromise and give in or be like, we can get over it. Sometimes it's just too much. I think.
Yeah. I didn't look at too many of the reasons why people are getting divorced. I know the big ones are financial reasons and big conflicts, say you have disagreeing ideas on religion or big values like that.
I've got some actually.
Okay.
The top reasons for divorce by National Library of Medicine, 75% is actually lack of commitment.
Oh,
yeah,
that's interesting.
Oh, right.
Wait, what does that mean?
Like adultery.
Yeah.
Wait,
60% is infidelity or extramarital affairs.
Wait, lack of commitment. What do you mean by that?
Those basically are the same, right?
No, it's separate actually. Maybe it intertwines, but the data they've got top reasons for divorce basically.
So what does it mean by lack of commitment?
They're not willing to, basic commitment issues. They're not willing to, they get afraid of spending the rest of their life with each other, or committing to it.
And then
out after they've already been married.
Yeah,
and then infidelity is having an affair.
I think it kind of affair. I think it kind of goes hand in hand a little bit.
There's for sure some causality.
Yeah. 58% is too much conflict or arguing. 45% is getting married too young. 37% financial. 35% substance abuse. 24% domestic violence.
Wait, hold on. You're those don't add up to 100.
No, it's not adding up to 100.
Oh, so you're saying
Those are just listing reasons.
Yeah, so this is proportion of marriages that report having that in there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, because a marriage could have multiple of these issues, right? At the same time.
Yeah.
Exactly. 18% lack of support from family, 17% health, 13% religion, and 13% no premarital education.
Huh.
Yeah. Because maybe they feel like their partner is not qualified enough, or
premarital education. I feel
they weren't married. They didn't have much education before.
Oh,
so maybe they feel they're not equal, or
well, I guess we're all glad we're getting degrees right now.
Yeah, maybe honestly.
So I think that one of the main reasons that people aren't wanting to get married as much anymore, it's not so much that people now don't want to commit to people as much. But they're just looking at these statistics, which we haven't brought up yet. But the statistic is 50% of first marriages end in divorce, and in second marriages are 65% end in divorce. So people are just looking at that statistic, and they're like, well, yes, I would love to have the long-term relationship with someone, and I will put in the commitment and put in the work, but maybe my partner won't, and there's always that risk that will happen. And then they're looking at some of the consequences for when that divorce happens. Yeah. So we can go on to that. I guess before we do, I can counter that a little bit. Like you were talking about the impact of education. One of the statistics is couples that attend college are 25% less likely to end in divorce.
Yeah.
And then if you have an income over $50,000 a year, then your chances of divorce decrease by 30%. If you regularly attend religious services, then your chances decrease by 46%. So there's a lot of these factors that people don't normally take into account when they're looking at just the broad, 50% of marriages end in divorce. There's a lot that goes into it. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, if you said if you go on this plane, it has a 50% chance of crashing.
Right.
And like, there's no way I'm going on that plane.
Yeah.
But marriage is different. It's very much dependent on the individual. So it doesn't make too much sense to look at the statistics on the collective and treat it like it's a plane crash, which is something that's completely out of your control. This is like, we know that marriage takes a lot of effort on the part of people. You have to put in a lot of effort before you actually decide to make that commitment, and then you have to put in the work to keep it going. So I think even though the statistics are pretty bad, like maybe I'm going to be smarter picking my partner. I'm going to put in more work to stay committed to them, and I'm going to really do my best to make sure that doesn't happen to me, and I can lower the chances a lot.
I think a better analogy for that 50% crash of the plane is like, there's a 50% chance you crash the plane, but you're the pilot.
Right.
So it's like, kind of whenever you're going into it.
But I'm a good pilot, so it won't crash.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, I have belief in myself that it'll work out.
True. I think there's two things to be, looking out for as well. Like, a lot of, well, I guess here's the big thing that, like, whenever you look at these statistics, there's a lot of biases, obviously, because you're comparing yourself against an aggregate population, where he just said that the majority of these, like, statistics is based around things like income, religion, and that like is different for everyone, right? So you're comparing yourself with people who are, like, I don't know, below the poverty line, who act in, like, who are in a very different, like, group.
Yeah.
So it's just like there's an
It's very skewed.
Yeah, there's a very skewed if you look at a total aggregate.
Also, Asian Americans are only like 15%. 15% of Asian American marriages end in divorce.
Yeah.
Well, that's like a cultural thing. I
Right.
feel
So
like,
there's a lot that just shows you how much culture and your attitude going into it.
Well, they
can
could still be
change.
unhappy. They could still be the same amount of
That's true.
unhappiness,
Yeah.
but it's just that, like divorce in like
It's looked down
Eastern
upon.
countries, it's looked down upon. Or
This is in America, though.
That's the
Yeah.
that's the second point I was going to bring up. Like,
Yeah.
even though the divorce isn't necessarily like an indicator of like how happy marriages are in totally, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons for
Yeah.
it, and also it's like if the marriage rate or the divorce rate was lower, there could still be a 50% or more percent of marriages that are just unhappy but aren't willing to divorce because of societal constraints.
No, I agree. But one thing is, people look at the 50% as a whole thing, but actually, divorce rates has been decreasing in the last decade or two.
Yeah,
So-
I saw that too.
Good news.
Yeah, thankfully, because whenever I talk with my friends, we always talk about it's so high. I'm so afraid what's gonna happen, but it's actually been decreasing.
maybe that's a generational thing. I feel like
Okay.
because maybe a decade ago, those people who were getting divorced,
Yeah.
maybe that's the millennials, or I don't know if whatever the thing before millennials was. That's the people who are getting divorced. Maybe there's something wrong. Not something wrong. Something different about their generation, right?
It's possible.
But then now, since it's decreasing more, I guess not our generation, but what's the generation before us? Whatever that is, Gen X, I think, or Gen Y or something.
No,
But whatever that is, maybe.
I think it's
It is
millennials.
millennials.
Oh, really?
Because then we're right after.
Okay, so then whatever.
just some of the age group. I understand what you're getting at. Though. Yeah, it makes sense.
We're in
I mean,
different generations, so.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, it's been decreasing. Like, for example, the divorce rate from 2008 to 2016 declined by 18% to people younger than 45 years old. So, it's decreasing. So it's not all bad,
Well, yeah, but actually another thing also to whatever that, but is that, as you said, less people are getting divorced. So since less people are getting divorced, there's also less marriages. There's less
that's
divorces.
also, both of them are decreasing.
So we could do a statistical analysis right now, but I don't
Marriage
think
rates are decreasing and divorce rates are decreasing. So
Okay. So we're talking about divorce now. Why is divorce such a big issue? Why are people, and men particularly today, there's this whole red pill manosphere movement where they're encouraging young men not to get married because they say the risks are too high and there's no benefits for them. There's nothing they can get out of marriage. So does anyone have something they want to say about that?
What demographic says that? Like, what type of people say that?
I mean, it's not really demographics. It's just a large portion of
The new
men
wave.
specifically. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think it's just because they look at headlines, right? They look at divorces and like half the person taking away half their wealth or something. They look at those big headlines and make up their mind on that and be like, marriage is all sucks. If you get divorced, it's all tragedy. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I was getting at like divorce courts. There's definitely a notion that they're skewed in the favor of the woman.
Yep.
And based on what I saw, I didn't look too much into it, but I think historically that was definitely the case when women were the like normal, had normal care of the children, and gender roles were more prominent. It was always assumed that care would go to the mother, but there are laws that prohibit the discrimination based on gender when it comes to determining custody laws. And also I read that 90% of custody is like determined without arguing in court.
Okay.
So it might just be the case. Obviously it does more often go to the women, so people think that they're rigged, but
maybe a lot of men don't want the responsibility.
Yeah, and they like, I mean, it should be obvious women normally care more about spending time with the children and are still normally the primary caretakers of the children, and the men are more involved with the career. Even today, that's still the case. So
no, yeah, I agree with that. That makes sense.
Yeah, another reason I think I've been seeing a lot is that people change, and if you like shackle yourself to one person and then they show their true colors, and you're screwed, right? So what do you guys have to say to that?
I feel like that's kind of your fault if you're because that means you haven't given enough time before marriage. Because I feel like maybe people get marriage too quickly whenever they
change in their 30s, like people's personalities change, like 20 years down the line, married perfectly, and then all of a sudden your partner is just a totally different person. Then
maybe you have to change with them.
Yeah,
well, you do. Sometimes it goes the other way though.
Yeah, obviously.
I don't think people actually change much after their brain develops by like 25. I think it is. There is, if you get married after 25, then you have less chance of divorce as well. So that's something to think about. But after that point, I mean, isn't that kind of the beautiful part about marriage, is that you can weave your life with someone else and grow and change as one unit, basically.
Aww.
Well, that's so sweet, Carson.
Lovey-dovey.
Okay, this kind of going back, I don't think we really captured the gravity of the concern people have about once they actually do get divorced. Like, it does still happen sometimes. Like, what if your wife, you did your best and were super careful picking her, but then one day she's like cheating on you, or she's a serial cheater, you find out.
Or men.
Or this is just hypothetical. But this is the
just Carson thing?
This is the scenario that you find on like Reddit comments is my wife cheated on me, and then she took my kids, she took half my money, and now I'm still paying alimony payments to her monthly, and it like completely ruined my life, and I never should have gotten married in the first place.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a huge problem. It's
and
hard
then
to
there's
say.
also no fault divorce, which is more common now, where they don't even have to have a reason. It's maybe they get tired of you. And that kind of goes against the fundamental idea of marriage about it being a long-term commitment. Like, divorce was supposed to only be if your husband is like abusing you, then obviously you want to get out of the house immediately. But also if you're unhappy in the marriage, then that could be worse for your kids. You would have to spend the next 60 years being unhappy. So that's where the no fault divorce is more of that's why people advocate for it. So
yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, we didn't touch too much upon, that sometimes you do have to get away, and sometimes you do have to, not everything works out, basically, right? Like I said, abusive marriages was, domestic violence was 25% of the reason. Infidelity, I can't say that word.
Infidelity.
There you go. 60% of the time. So those are honestly the huge reasons. Although lack of commitment is up there, those are some of the huge reasons. They can't get past that, and that's fair. That makes sense. Like, if a person cheated on me, I wouldn't be with them personally. So I just feel like I understand that. So not every marriage has to work out, and you can't move forward.
Warning to Pre's future wife. You heard it from the man.
Don't cheat on me.
Oh.
I mean, I'm sure he doesn't mind getting that out there.
Yeah, there's no problem with that.
So what do you think about people saying there's no, like we talked about the risks of it, and there's no useful part about marriage for the men? There's nothing to gain for them. That's the words that's normally used. But we talked about some of the like personal and also financial stability, all that sort of stuff. But I guess what I'm getting towards is marriage isn't what it used to be in terms of how it benefited the men.
Yeah, I kind of, well, this is obviously my opinion, but I kind of feel like that red pill movement is men are less willing to show that they're emotionally vulnerable. So maybe that's like a facade to kind of stay strong, type of thing, which, you know, I kind of don't agree with, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
No, that makes sense.
Well, I think they have some good points. Like there is, it is bad. Like men are disproportionately affected by divorce, mainly just because they're the ones bearing the financial burden. And then so they automatically have to pay more to the woman who is a lot of times like really hurt them. And then they continue to pay alimony for a long time. Women initiate 70% of divorce proceedings, and now with no fault divorce, like they do have a reason to be scared that like their wife is gonna change up or start cheating on him. And then another thing they like to say is along the idea that there's no benefits in marriage for men. Marriage, based on historical gender roles, the men used to get something out of marriage, like someone to raise their children and someone to cook their meals, someone to look after the home while they're at work all day, someone that they can come back to that's like they're waiting for them after a long day's work. But now what the majority of women have entered the workplace and they have a college degree, and normally both people are working in the households now. So I think as women have become more liberated, that's obviously a good thing, but it has probably contributed to a decline in men seeking marriage because they're no longer interested in a provider. They don't need a provider, and they aren't interested in being a homemaker because they have their own careers. So like, what's the upside financially for the men? Because they're still expected to be the provider, but now they have to pay for childcare, and the women are having their own jobs. So
yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit of a difficult topic because you can't really have it where like I don't know. I feel like that can. I mean, you can't really have it another way, right? You know, like we're moving towards a more equal society, hopefully, and
well,
I mean,
as long as the economy it makes it so that both, like, you can't raise a family without both partners contributing financially, then you're right. There's not really an alternative.
Yeah.
But if there was a way that you could have one spouse carrying the whole financial burden, which still is pretty common.
It is.
But I guess women are just more interested in their careers now, like even if they're not bearing the financial burden. So maybe, I mean, they would probably say it would be more, there'd be more incentive for men, and marriage would be more appealing for men if the women were still went back to spending more time in the home carefully. And raising the children, and more like what you'd see a traditional wife. Yeah. I think that's what a lot of men would like if it was possible. I think a lot of women are like that too. Like you see the whole trad wife movement on TikTok.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I mean, we're not really talking about gender roles in this episode, but that is part of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of it is the men now have more responsibility, so they're shying away from it, honestly. I think a lot of it is they're afraid to put in the work, or they don't want to, so they're, you know, they don't want to get into it. I think that's what it is, which is kind of their fault, but, you know, they've got to start putting more responsibility on themselves and committing to it, basically. That's my opinion. But
so we've covered the bulk of the argument for just the basic institution of marriage. Do we still need it today? And the risks. We've focused on the risks for men. There's obviously risks for women. I just realized we need to.
Yeah, I know.
This, like, part of the reason they get those alimony payments is because if they're giving up their career to raise the children and be a homemaker, then they're completely financially dependent on the man. So even though the women are initiating 70% of divorces, if it is that circumstance where they're a more traditional wife, then it could definitely be very bad for them to get divorced because they no longer have someone. That's why we have custody and alimony payments.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of this stuff is headlines, you know. In reality, this is the type of stuff that the reason why women get more alimony and stuff is because that's the type of stuff. It's not just them trying to steal your money and running away with it, you know. There's reasons to it.
I would hope most women don't get married to steal your money. Like, I would hope that.
Yeah, exactly.
We would hope. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Exactly. Both sides, by the way. But yeah.
Okay, so let's summarize this. Do y'all want to explain or how you think about marriage based on what we said today, just quickly? And then I think you had some stats.
These are quick stats, but yeah. What we think about marriage?
Yeah.
Personally?
Based on what we said, yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I said this before. In my opinion, I don't view marriage as a negative. I view it as a positive. It builds relationship. It builds commitment. It builds, you know, and these are not just stuff that you use in a relationship, but just in life. So I think it's very important. And it's nice to share your rest of your life with someone. And I'm personally fine with committing to one person. I don't think it's that big a deal. I think people need to be more receptive to that. You know, you don't always need multiple relationships, etc. I think we might get into that later, but yeah, I think that's my point of view on that.
Do you guys have anything you want to add? Because you kind of summed it up for me.
Yeah, no, that's kind of basically what I kind of view marriage as a kind of a sacred type of thing, a sacred connection that you're building with someone. And I obviously want to get married sometime. And
we hope.
I hope, yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of view marriage as like, I remember talking with, like, we went to dinner with Carson's dad, and I said some bars, or apparently that's what you guys said, but like, I kind of view marriage as a relationship where you build something with someone. Yep. And that's kind of what I value, because that, like, in my life, I want to look back and I want to look at what I've done. Is this getting too emotional? Or?
No, it's good. I like this.
Concrete that you can always look back.
Yeah. Well, nice. I look back on my life and I know that I've built something, you know, very valuable and very enriching, you know, to the world with my partner. You know, if that's my kids or whatever. That's like my view.
No. I 100% agree with it. Not just you. Yeah, no, I can join you on that. You know, kids and just building a life with someone. Yeah, I can look into that. I think that's what a lot of people build towards, right? It's not just yourself. The basis is family. So I can agree with that.
Carson, you have anything?
I think y'all summed it up nicely. I want to, like, I tried to make the best case for the Redpill movement as I could, because I know so many people think that way and they do have some good points, but I think that you can make a lot of choices to mitigate the risk of that happening to you. And I think the downsides of not getting married, I mean, yeah, there's statistics are bad, but what's the alternative? Just living your life rejecting the whole institution of marriage, like that we've had for centuries and centuries. That doesn't seem like the right solution. So it's worth the risk. So we're gonna now go into long-term relationships and like open relationships, and also same-sex relationships. And the thing that people start to think of, even maybe when we were talking about whether people should get married or not, is at the end of the day, people have the right to, and then we're going to start talking about whether people should have children or not. So this is, it's even a better example of this is people think that everyone should just make the decision for themselves. So before we go any further, I just had a couple points. Like there is some reason why you would care if somebody else is in a polyamorous relationship or if they have kids or not. I think people do have the right to make personal decisions like this for themselves, and we shouldn't judge any individuals specifically, but taboos and societal norms do have a role to play in society. And also, if we think it's in our interest to reverse some trends in our society, then we have to do our part to make sure that our friends and family at the smaller scale are making informed decisions. And it's okay to be like encouraging them to make decisions that you think would be better for that person.
Right.
And also in order to change the broader trends of society. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like you're obviously like maybe like, for example, like telling your kids and stuff like that, you're older, you have experience, so you know what's going on, right? That makes sense.
And we're all young here, and a lot of our listeners, however, the 20 of them that watch this, there could be young as well. So it's important for relationships and marriage, and whether you have kids or not, these are all some of the biggest decisions, probably the most important decisions that you're ever going to make. So it makes sense to be as informed as possible. So by doing this research and talking about it, we're becoming more informed ourselves to make the best decision. And while you're listening to it, that applies to you as well, is our goal.
You're right. Like my dad right now.
And you should also listen to your dad, because he might have
Carson's dad in particular, because he said some good advice for us.
Yeah, he did.
Well, yeah, anyone that has your best interest in mind, it pays to listen to them instead of being like, it's my decision.
Yeah.
No one should be telling me whether I should have kids or not.
Right. Okay, so first off, what are we doing?
Long-term relationships that say that they're committed to each other and they're maybe cohabitating, but they have no intention of marriage, because marriage is just a certificate.
Well, that kind of goes back to what you view as marriage.
Yeah.
Like I said, you have the certificate, which some people don't have. There's no value in that, I don't think. But some people, it's their opinion on if they value the certificate.
Well, there is legal benefits, but
yeah. I guess so. But like with a long-term relationship with no intent of marriage, it's kind of like what you want to get out of marriage. If you believe, getting married is going to make your relationship a little bit stronger, have a little bit more meaning to your life, then, it's your choice to get married. But people who actually go into a relationship with no intent of marriage, maybe they're not like religious, or they don't believe in like marriage, they already feel like maybe their relationship is healthy enough to that they don't need marriage to make it a little stronger, which it's totally fine as well. It's based on the person.
Yeah, so it can be equivalent to marriage, I guess, but I would think people should, it goes back to the commitment part, which we were talking about earlier. Like, maybe you're not as committed of a couple as you say you are if you're not willing to make your commitment like massively public in a wedding ceremony and bind your finances together, and go through the process to get the legal contract, where you could have, like, part of it is that you're putting yourself at risk by getting this commitment, because that shows you how willing you are to make it work. And like I said a while ago, if you're just living together, then there's always that option to leave if you don't have that legal binding contract. So part of it is what you make of it, but I think there's some merit in.
No, I 100% agree with that.
But there's also other ways, like we're talking about the risks of getting married from like a government point of view, but there's ways you could go about that where you can only have the benefits. Like I'm not sure what a prenup does.
Prenups, yeah.
But there's obviously people have the choice to do like a prenup if they don't want to they want to get the certificate and all the benefits.
But they're worried about the negatives.
The negatives, yeah.
Yeah, no, prenups, protect against assets, compensation, all that. I looked it up, but yeah, no, that's definitely a way to. But the problem with that is a lot of people think that it's distrust or it ruins the romance. Like you're always afraid that you're gonna get divorced at some point.
Well, yeah,
So
but
You're going in with an
It's
out.
like you're starting it off
in a negative way.
yeah, but
actually
well, the
get
thing is, we're talking about right now like long-term relationship that have no marriage, and
Well,
they're
you
not.
can't use a prenup if you're. But
No,
they
no,
don't
no, no. But
have
the thing is
need.
that
If that's why they're not doing
yeah,
it.
yeah. But the thing is, they're probably not getting married because they don't want to get into the risk of getting married legally, right?
But
but
does
you
that
could-
mean if they're not as willing to put more risk to it, that they're not going to be as committed?
I don't know what that means.
Like if they're not as willing to take the risk of making it legally binding and
Mhm.
doing it publicly, then does that mean they're not as committed?
Well, no, but like you could have that same relationship, but you could only get the benefits of legal marriage, right?
No, what he means is, okay, imagine like you're starting a restaurant, right? And the moment you start day one, you're like texting the other guy like, hey, I want to sell this lot. Like, would you be interested? You're like going into it with an escape plan, even though it's like,
okay, imagine you're starting a business,
But they have-
and if it failed, then you would lose everything.
Uh-huh.
But if versus say the government gives you a risk-free loan for like, and basically just gives you a check for
his example is just so much more complicated.
$100,000,
Oh,
and they say you can start the restaurant with no risk. Then you're
Right.
what's the odds of that restaurant being successful? Because you're not going to be
As
putting as much
passionate
work
about
into
it,
it.
yeah.
You're not, because there's not
There's
any
no risk there.
for you if it fails. So
So you're saying like these people who are getting married with that are less passionate?
No. It's people who he's trying to say that if there's a risk factor, you're more likely to work towards negating that risk factor. You're more likely to put more effort in it. And
Well, yeah, but these people don't value marriage anyway. So why, if you don't
But
value
they
anything,
value the commitment is the idea. Like they want it to be equivalent to marriage in every way, just without any of the risk. And we're saying, I mean, marriage is everyone.
because there's no reason not to get married. The reasons not to get married is the negatives, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't think, because if you're not getting married, the only reason you're not is you're afraid of the negatives. That's basically what he's
yeah,
saying.
but you can take away the negatives.
That's what I'm saying. That's good.
So everyone acknowledges that marriage is going to be hard, and your relationship is going to be under tension sometimes. But if you don't have any risks of walking away when times get tough, why wouldn't you just be a lot more willing to leave that person versus people that have gotten married and taken on the risk? Then they're more likely to put in the work to make the relationship work no matter what.
So, but what's the difference between that and just a long-term relationship?
Because you don't have the risk. One, you have the risk, so you're more willing to put in the work.
Okay.
That's what
Does that make sense?
No, but
Okay. Hopefully everyone else understands.
We'll talk to him after the pod.
what is a
Oh my God.
polyamorous relationship?
Yeah, Carson, tell us about that.
Whoa, is it when you have like a whole, I don't know, brood of people just chasing you around, or?
Whoa.
Oh, it's when
I don't know
you
about
get
that.
married more than two people in a marriage. So
Or a relationship.
Oh, you
Like-
mean polygamy.
or a relationship.
He means polygamy, guys.
Oh, right, yeah.
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 Did
Or a
I- is that
relationship.
not a word?
So you get married to multiple people?
Polyamorous? Yeah.
No, I think
Not
that's
married, it's
monogamous,
just relationship. with
You know,
multiple
okay, mono means one and poly means multiple.
Many,
so
many.
monogamous versus
Polygamous.
yeah. Polygamous. Okay, so would y'all be in a polygamous relationship?
No,
Or
I'm
open-
good.
Unless it was you three.
What's the benefits of that?
All right.
What's the benefits of a polygamous?
Hey, multiple people, think about it.
You can think about it, Julian.
Yeah, I'm good.
Well, I mean,
I
lots of
don't
men
know.
think about it.
I don't think about
Isn't
it.
it like illegal
Yeah, I'm
in the
good
US or
too.
something?
No,
I
I don't think
don't
so.
know.
Because that
I'm
goes
pretty
against
sure it is.
Maybe
like-
in some states, but there's definitely
Really?
articles I've read and studies that we might get into where there's like
maybe legally
a-
it's not allowed.
and it's getting
Actually,
more
yeah, I
common
don't know.
too. And people are more interested in open relationships as well, which is this, but without the marriage process. Which maybe that you can't
No,
be legally.
No,
married.
I think there's a difference
crime.
between-
It's a crime in the US. That's
Okay,
like
that's-
1882.
Well, Julian, we
What?
can't be doing that,
Yeah,
Julian.
okay.
to get married to multiple people.
Yeah,
Really?
well, no, like a polygamous relationship.
Not a relationship. I don't think that's
marriage,
illegal.
marriage.
Marriage.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it's
I feel like that goes against like
can't get
the
legally,
First
but
Amendment.
it's just people living together and they like raising children as like 4 people or 3 people together.
Roommates.
Well,
Us?
like
Are we
having
talking about
sex-
us? Are we?
having sex with each other?
I was gonna say
Okay,
us
okay.
four, but
You gotta make it clear, Carson.
I
like-
gotta make it clear.
Yeah.
Hussein
So what's
to
the legal
understand
part?
this. There's no legal part. It's just
Wait. There should be a legal part there, right?
What are you talking
it's
about?
illegal. You just said that.
yeah, but what's illegal?
Marriage, having multiple.
Legally, like the
Legal.
government
Yes,
part of marriage.
Yes.
Okay, that makes
But relationships are fine.
yeah, it makes
Oh
sense.
yeah. I guess so.
But also, there's a difference between, I think, open relationship and polyamorous. Because in a polyamorous relationship, it's like 3 people are in a relationship, where open is like
Oh, you
the person has a relationship with somebody else and the partner is not connected with that.
okay?
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
That
Let
so,
me make that clear.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. All right, so y'all,
That was a lot of
everyone
discussion
said
there.
I'm
that
pretty-
they wouldn't be. So, downsides we went over. There's obvious benefits, I guess.
Obvious
some
benefits?
people.
Not to Hussein.
Me?
Really, he wouldn't.
No,
Oh,
I'm
okay. What
good.
about you, Carson?
I
What about
mean,
your 10
I
words?
think the negatives far outweigh, and yeah, the positives of having multiple partners doesn't really appeal to me anyway. So
Yeah.
And there's actually, I'm pretty sure there's a TV show about polyamorous polyamorous relationships.
I think so.
I think there's like it's like Love Island, but like
Yeah.
3 people. I saw on Netflix.
I did see that. It's new,
Yeah,
actually,
I
on
know.
Netflix.
I haven't watched it, by the way.
He's got to clear that up.
okay, so why do you not want to? Why is it so?
Well,
unappealing?
I'm more of a one-on-one type of person. Like I feel like the only connection what's wrong with No, I feel like the
He expected a 4-on-4.
Julian's very disappointed.
I'm sorry.
right now.
Sorry, Julian. I'm more of a. I feel like I'm the only way I can be like satisfied and fulfilled is to focus on one person. I feel like polyamorous relationships. I don't even know how that works because I've never really met anyone in a polyamorous.
You've never been in a single MS relationship either, so I don't know. Like, to be fair, monogamous.
This whole podcast, we're just going against at each other, man. What's going on? But no,
I feel
I was
like
kidding.
that has a lot of problems with polyamorous relationships or open relationships too, because like it's not really a relationship anymore. It's just kind of an exchange or a transaction because you're kind of just getting something from someone else and then giving it to someone else and getting and stuff like that. But there's not actually a connection or relationship because one main part of a relationship is that you are connected to one person and only that one person, and they're connected to you and only you. And like you being in like a trio or a quadrio or whatever, like you would get jealous of like maybe giving more time to this one person or something like that.
that's one of the negatives. Yeah, no, 100%. No, I agree with you. That makes sense.
I'm not really sure what the benefits are actually.
The benefits are hard to say. I tried searching it up, but it's just that.
I have.
You have? Okay, do that.
That I read. So we all know that humans have emotional needs and they want to have connections with people. So how about more is better? So why don't you just have
More is better, guys. More is better.
people? It's simple as that. More people to fulfill your emotional needs. How
More
could that be
needs
a bad
fulfilled.
thing?
No, of course.
Yeah, no, it's their opinion. I don't know if I'll follow it,
That
but
takes away from other needs though. Like having, you're fulfilling your other needs that are maybe short term. Like
Well,
maybe
this is a very subjective thing to say. You know how people say age is just a number? Well, you know what else is just a number? The amount of people you have.
Okay. Well, it goes back to what we should encourage our friends and family to pursue. Like if
polyamorous relationships.
sister or was like, I'm interested in a polyamorous relationship. That's when, instead of just going, well, it's okay and we're not going to judge anyone.
it changes when
This
it's
is where
family.
social taboos, like as I was saying, it might not be in our best interest to just say everyone can do what they want to do.
Why didn't we bring
So-
this up with Carson's dad? That would have been fun.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, actually.
But no, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Social taboo and
Okay, so downsides, that this is one of the reasons why maybe you might want to steer people away from this, that if you have their best interest in mind, like you have the jealousy aspect with multiple people. There's a statistic floating around that we'll like put the source in the description, but it's been questioned, but that 92% of polyamorous relationships end in divorce, which I do believe because, I mean, did y'all hear the story about Destiny as like
Oh yeah, I did see that.
a famous streamer, and he
Political
was like
figure.
a big advocate for polyamorous relationships, and then what do you know, his wife
Ran away.
unfortunately, very sad for him, but like ran away to
Yeah.
I think a different country with some guy that he met. She would decide
was
she
hooking
was
up with.
done with. Well, she was hooking up with him, and then suddenly she decided she was done with the polyamorous stuff, and she wanted to be monogamous with the other person. So that
Wait, was it only him, the one streamer, and then multiple wives, or how was it?
no, they
No.
both had the option to.
It's an open relationship.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Interesting.
Okay, sorry, yeah, not polyamorous, just open.
It's open. So that's the thing with open relationships is that they start off as you have the emotional connection with one person, but they term it as everything else just physical with multiple other people. I think that's what that Hussein doesn't like.
I
don't
don't know.
like
I
that at
was kind of
all.
like taught against that as well, honestly.
Right? Yeah.
That like the physical kind of came with as well with the emotional.
Yeah, I feel like the
It's
physical
one-
comes with the emotional.
Well,
Agreed.
they argue that,
But that's
they
their
can
argument.
Separate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but in Destiny's case, unfortunately for him, she couldn't do it. So
Maybe she connected with the other person.
exactly, that's
Whoa.
where the problems come up is that
Yeah, if
interesting.
you
they catch feelings for the other person that they're doing it. But yeah.
So the other big part of this is that if the purpose of marriage is to create a stable environment to raise children in, so if people, this goes less for open relationships that are not interested in marriage, but most people end up having children, whether they plan to or not. So if they're in a, say they have committed or they're in a polyamorous marriage, whatever, then that still seems very bad for the children because there's less stability. It's confusing to the children. They get emotionally attached to partners if it's an open relationship and they haven't committed.
Yeah.
Even in a polyamorous, like by nature, people are going to be coming in and out of your life. Like I was reading Reddit threads of people's anecdotes about raising children in these types of relationships, and they're like, oh well, I'm going to try to keep my daughters from, I never let them like get attached to the people that come into my life unless I'm sure that it's going to be long term, because they always have like, they're like, previously my daughters got super attached to my ex-girlfriend and then she left, and the child could feel like abandoned because of that if someone significant in their life just leaves. That causes all sorts of attachment issues.
That's actually a really good point.
There's also a lot of things where, like, if it's a polyamorous relationship and you have a kid, right? And then there's the birth mom, and then there's the birth dad, and then there's the third person, right? A lot of times the third person might feel left out,
Like similar to, I mean, not the same, but like a surrogate or something like that.
Exactly. It's like that. Like, it'll be a little like it.
How do you divide the responsibilities of raising this child?
Exactly.
I mean, you can't deny we're meant to be monogamous with a man and woman because if you think marriage's purpose is to have children, then the child has two parents by nature. So it doesn't really work to have three people trying to raise the child, because one ends up just being the fun uncle and the other two that are biologically related to them have to.
I have actually 2 points to what you just said.
Yeah.
Because that kind of, I feel like what you're saying, like that, maybe if you say in like 20, 30, 50 years that you might get canceled, because it's kind of like a trend of like, maybe because maybe 50 years ago, people would have said, oh, by law or by nature, it's only supposed to be men and women who are supposed to raise a family. And some people have that opinion still to this day, but they kind of have, that perspective's kind of changed. So maybe in like 50 years, people might be like, oh, it's okay to have a polyamorous relationship. It's better to be open.
No, I don't think that's...
Well, yeah, but they probably had the same perspective. What you're saying right now, you're like, oh, that's not whatever. They probably had the same perspective like 100 years ago.
I can agree with that. It takes a village to raise a child. So if you have four parents,
village in a relationship?
Well, that's not exactly what it is, but it's just a phrase.
It's just an expression, but the idea is that multiple people it takes the whole community to like fulfill all the needs of the child.
What community?
It's not what you think,
talking
Julian.
about? Like,
Julian. To be fair to the people who like open relationships, the arguments they've always said in the Reddit articles and articles like in favor of this is that all it is it goes back to more is better. All it is more parents available to meet all the needs of the child, a bigger range of interests and like energy levels to match the child
Income,
at different points.
that's also a thing.
More income.
Yeah, I mean, they just have, I guess, they term it as they have enough trust with each other to do that. I don't know if it always works out, but I mean, to each their own, but sometimes it's just negative to a society. Who knows? You don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's important to keep looking at the trends of this to see if it's good for society or not.
Okay.
Not the trends, the statistics. Our last type of alternative marriage that we'll look at is same-sex marriage. So this has been trending upward as more people have been a lot more favorable of same-sex marriage, and it goes back to the idea of anyone that like people have the right to make their own decisions. I think the main argument that people have, though, is as it relates to child rearing, as we said, or I think that the purpose of marriage is for children, as I've said multiple times. So it comes down to people. It should be obvious that men and women are different, and this difference is so intrinsical and based in biology that it can't really be reconciled by personality differences or even how one would identify, which that's not on the agenda today, but
touching everything.
They go hand in hand. So the information here is based on a meta-analysis of 12 different studies in the National Library of Medicine. Basically, to start, going back to men and women being different, everyone should have this intuition based on if they've spent any time with kids. Infants and toddlers prefer their mothers to their fathers when they are seeking solace from hunger or fear or sickness. Mothers tend to be more soothing to them, more responsive to cries of the infants than fathers. They're better at detecting children's emotions in their face and postures and gestures. Children that were deprived of maternal care during extended periods of their life reported feeling like they lacked feeling and superficial relationships, or they had superficial relationships and they exhibited hostile tendencies. And then fathers also have their own areas that they excel in, like providing discipline and play and challenging their children to embrace life and the challenges that come with it, and competitiveness and ambition. They provide an essential role model for boys specifically, and a father's presence in the home protects a child from fear and strengthens the ability for them to feel safe. And there's lots of statistics showing the downsides of having single motherhood or single fatherhood, where you don't have that opposite gender role model showing you how to behave. A couple more studies specifically from this meta-analysis. There was one from UT in 2012 that found that young adult children of parents who had same-sex relationships performed worse than heterosexual families in 77 of 80 outcomes. And a 2015 study using a representative sample of 207,000 children, 512 having same-sex parents, reported that emotional problems were twice as prevalent as the children with same-sex parents compared to those with opposite-sex parents. So these are just studies that I found from this one meta-analysis. There's also many articles that say the opposite, like when you're looking at same-sex couples for adoption, for instance, a lot of same-sex couples have a higher income, like gay couples looking to adopt a child are normally going to have a higher income than the rest of the population. So in that case, it's probably a lot better to have a same-sex couple with a high income than a heterosexual in poverty. So there are some studies also that claim there's no discernible difference raising a child in a heterosexual family versus homosexual. The article I read pointed out a couple of flaws with a couple of those studies, like self-reporting, small sample size, and using a bad comparison group like single mothers in the comparison for heterosexual. So it comes down to, there's a whole bunch of studies based on this article. I think it's pretty clear, and based on our intuitions, that it's better for a child to have a male and female, a mother and father as their parents to raise them, because it comes down to the father. If you have two fathers, then they can't provide that missing component of what a mother can provide, no matter, even if one happens to be more feminine, they just can't fill that gap. That's not really how masculinity and femininity works, I think. So that was a big monologue.
Well, one thing I kind of want to point out is that earlier in the podcast, we talked about the plane anecdote of, it's not really you getting on the plane and there's a 50% chance of crashing. It's if you're a pilot. And with these statistics, I feel like we should have that same point of view. And that if you are in a same-sex marriage, maybe these statistics, they might look, maybe in favor of you or not in favor of you. But at the end of the day, you have control over how you raise that child, and you have the resources, hopefully, and you have the skill set to raise a child to fulfill its needs. And I feel like it's certainly possible. Maybe biologically it doesn't, like from your studies, it doesn't, fulfill those needs, but there's other ways you could fulfill those needs. I feel like we're getting a lot smarter and stuff like that. So it's in your control at the end of the day, just like how we said before.
The counter argument would be, being a male and female isn't in your control. That's something you were born with. And the hypothesis is that the differences between men and women are so vast. I mean, they go down to the DNA in each one of our cells having XX or XY chromosomes, that no matter how masculine of a woman you are, then you can't fulfill all the needs that would be provided by a man. But that's just, both arguments are hotly debated. So
yeah, that's a really touchy subject. It's like you said, people don't really choose to have feelings for like one gender or the other, right? So it's more of like, I mean, if you're really, depending on whether you look at those studies and you're like, oh, well, that explains the entire variance in the population, even though there are other factors such as income that determine like child outcomes, right? But like if you looked at those studies and you fully believed it, would you just say like same-sex couples should not have children at all? Like, do you think that necessarily just doing like a flat bar of that kind of relationship, having children, would be like ethical?
Well, that's kind of what you would have to say if you are if you're believing these studies. You can say that it might be worse for children, but the downsides of denying gay couples the right to have that children is worse than the downsides of raising children that are statistically less likely to like graduate high school and stuff like that. So that's are all open questions, but that's definitely where it gets hard. Like, even if you acknowledge that it's not as good for the child, you still have, what about these couples that are desperately desiring children? So that's also for everyone to decide for this.
With that debate of like, if I got the conversation correct, was to like have the bar of like, not allowing like gay marriages or any other type of marriage to not have kids because it's not best for the kids. So it's kind of similar. If you have that standard of not allowing them to not have kids because it's not best for the kids, then you have the conversation of, why are we letting low income families have kids? Yeah. Because then it's not good for I think it's probably more dangerous for them to have kids because there's probably a higher probability that the kid might, all the negatives that come with low income.
Which is raising. My point. Even
that's
like
a good point,
heterosexual couples, like with certain income factors like poverty, might have worse outcomes.
And it would always be better, like when you're thinking about adoption, it's always better for the child to have some parents than
just
to have
one or no
parents. Even if they're a homosexual couple, that's always better if they're loving parents. That's the most important thing at the end of the day. Is if they,
or one parent. Like statistically, if you only have one parent, or if the child only has a mother and not a father in the household, like statistically, boys especially are much higher, much more likely to go into life of crime afterwards. So it's just really sad.
Yeah. I guess you just have to consider, I mean, this is for people that are in this situation and on the fence about having children. I mean, it is kind of taboo to have 10 children when you're living in poverty because you know that you can't take care of them. And it could also be taboo for a single mother to be like trying to bring children into that family if she doesn't have the ability to provide for them and meet all their needs. So you can say the same about, it's just something to keep in mind for when thinking about these issues and what we want to be encouraging. And at the end of the day, based on these studies, it does seem like it has a big impact. So we can't just write off claims. It's worth taking into account is all I'm trying to say. And then also, as far as government incentives go, people like the legal benefits of marriage, some of them like sharing healthcare and stuff. Sure, homosexual couples should be able to have those same benefits, but also when we're talking about what type of couples the government should favor, you might think that they should be incentivizing heterosexual couples versus other alternatives like polyamorous and like same sex. But that is a big topic and very controversial. So ready to
let's go to children now.
So the birth rate in the US has been declining year after year. It dropped 23% between 2007 and 2022. So the fertility rate right now in the US is 1.78 births per woman in 2022. So if you notice, that is less than 2, which 2.1 is the replacement rate for our population. So we would be in steep population decline if it weren't for immigration, is what that says. And 50% of women born in 1990 were childless when they turned 30. This is the first generation of women where that has been the case since the data started in 1920. I guess it's the only time that's happened. So, reasons why declining birth rate?
I think we talked about it before, right?
Contraceptives,
increasing costs of education, housing, and living costs.
Yeah, and I think we said we wanted to come back to that now.
Yeah.
Wait, what were we talking about? What was the conversation?
Like why are people having children?
Oh, right, yeah.
Later or not at all.
Yeah. Also with like people entering the workforce and how it is, it can be like structurally like just difficult for there to be like equal responsibility for children between a mother and a father. So then sometimes they just don't have children at all, right? So it's a pretty complicated topic. You were asking about the replacement rate, right? That little number.
Oh yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. That they're Europe. They're trying to have more kids.
Exactly,
which is kind of interesting because I would. What's the positives of having, I guess, more kids versus less kids? I don't know.
Well, the more kids is you would if you have above 2.1, like
like the above the replacement.
Yeah, so that means that if women on average had 2.1 children, that would mean that the population remains stabilized.
Or if it's higher, then it grows. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if it's higher than that rate, the population would grow.
Yeah.
Right now, most developed countries are at a stage, and this is just a phenomenon we've been seeing throughout the world, right? It's like as a country gets more developed, the population tends to decline because the birth rate lowers, right? Especially when Japan, but also South Korea is the biggest one right now. Their birth rate, I can look it up for you. but it's the worst one, and
Like it's pretty low.
it's to the point where I think their population would decline by like at least. Well, actually, I don't want to give you the.
Okay, while you're doing that, so yeah, population collapse is a big concern, especially in South Korea and Japan. Not so much here because of immigration yet, but that leads to a decline in economic growth. You start getting a shortage of young people and a shrinking workforce as the population is getting older and not being replaced. And that strains the welfare systems because you don't have the young people available to support these aging population that can no longer work. So
yeah, like already we're starting to lose a lot of money in our social security, for instance, where it used to be that used to make the government money. So now it's becoming more expensive because as baby boomers retire, we have a massive wave of old people. So the young people, like where it used to be 3 people for every old person, or 5 people for every old person, now it's like 3.
Okay.
So we lose money trying to give like support to, like retirement funds and all that.
Oh, okay.
So there's a big question right now whether we should cut the cost for that but here, just to give you an idea, what was the US replacement rate right now? Or like
1.7 or something, was it?
Yeah. So 1.7?
1.78.
In Korea, it is 0.7.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 0.5 in the capital.
Well,
apparently.
wait.
Wow.
Birth rate per woman? Or
No, birth rate per woman.
So most women.
Yeah, so the population will drop significantly, and part of the reason for that is because like he said, the United States is very dependent on immigration to keep that population high, right? In countries like South Korea, they're very against immigration, just generally, and naturalization. So because of that, without immigration, that means the population just drops.
Yeah. And
either people have to be more productive, or there has to be increased automation, or else the economy shrinks.
Yeah.
So they're so interested in robotics in Japan.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, I just read a headline this afternoon where Japan is now the 4th largest economy instead of the 3rd because of their aging population. They entered a recession. Now their economy shrunk. So that could happen to a country like South Korea significantly.
All right, let's get back into it. So we're going to be discussing pros and cons of having children to start off with.
All right. So having children, as we've been saying, I've been saying that's the purpose of marriage. So some benefits of it. It really just comes down to adding more fulfillment to your life. A quote from Jordan Peterson is, "If you don't want children, you probably will eventually. And if you don't, you're either deluded or immature." So
strong
he
take
definitely
on it.
represents a conservative viewpoint, if you know Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that. People, like, when it comes to talking about children, the fear is that people will grow up thinking they don't want children, and then once they reach 30, for women in particular, they reach 30 and they're in their they've moved up and reached the limit of their professional life, and they're surrounded by all these hyper competitive men doing the same. And then I think this is a reality for lots of women, is they reach 30 and they're like, oh, I actually really want a child now. And in some cases it's too late. So women have a biological clock that isn't as much as an issue for men. So that's one fear. And then the other fear is that as people become more tolerant of families not having children, I guess, I don't know if we've always been tolerant of that, but there's
we haven't.
We don't want people to have regret or not be able to live life to as full as they can, as they would experience with children.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a fair point to an extent, but I guess it just sometimes depends on what people think fulfillment and joy is. Personally, yeah, I think children do bring joy and fulfillment and happiness, but some people might not. So it just depends on them.
Right. So that's the idea. Like some people might genuinely just not enjoy children or really feel like they don't want children. And a lot of people seem to agree that the worst thing that could happen is if children that are families, couples that don't want children, if we force them to have children, like that would be a worst case scenario because they shouldn't be raising them if they don't want them.
Exactly. Yeah.
But there may be, due to societal trends and people like actually encouraging them the opposite to not have children. Like there's this whole movement on TikTok of women in their 30s talking about how free they are because they don't have any kids and they have more income and they just spend all day going to brunches and watching Taylor Swift and doing drinking wine alone in their apartment. So, but lots of young girls maybe are like, oh, that sounds great. I actually don't want children. Maybe they've heard other couples that they know like talking about how hard it is and their parents complaining and offering to give their children as a joke to the other couples if they can. So they could feel like they don't want children when in reality, if they had more encouragement to have it, then they would have been happier overall.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, not goes back, but it kind of works hand in hand with like maybe sometimes like what we said for why people wouldn't want marriage. It's like you got to sacrifice a decent amount to have a child, right? And time, money, and emotional commitment. So maybe people just don't want to do that. I understand. Yeah, that's up to them. It's their choice. Maybe they're not ready enough, and we wouldn't want them, like you said, to be raising a children without wanting the child, right? Forced to raise a child.
I guess the hope is that people would understand, and they have some people not just encouraging them not to have children and showing off and bragging about all the benefits of having no children. We want to make sure, since it is such a big decision and
they have both the sides.
Yeah. So some of the specific reasons for children is people find meaning in their life by taking on moral responsibility. So, and just big responsibilities in general. So just because it's hard to raise a child doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't. That is what makes it so fulfilling. And it allows you to experience the world as a little kid again. I saw another, I don't spend this much time on TikTok, okay? But it is good to see what's happening in the world. And one thing I saw like during Christmas time, a little girl running down for like her first Christmas as a 3-year-old toddler. And she's in complete awe of the Christmas tree that her parents set up for her. And if you don't have children, then you don't get that opportunity to create memories for someone and to re-experience the world with all the awe and wonder that comes with young eyes looking at the world for the first time.
Yeah, no, that's agreeable. I mean, children give you the opportunity to nurture, teach, and, basically shape a new generation, right? You're living a lot of the stuff. Sometimes you're living, reliving yourself through your children, right? That's definitely one of the aspects of it, which people would want to do as they get older, because, you're getting older, you would like to experience the younger things, and you're doing that through the children. Obviously not forcing them, but, I think that's the positives of it, for sure.
Yeah, and like one thing to add, children also kind of going to that success rate of marriage. I feel like if you are to have children, it kind of adds to that marriage, adds to that relationship.
Yeah. Of
having that child. It's not, it's obviously not a reason, like whenever you're struggling through a marriage and there's other problems, the solution is not always to have kids.
Right.
That's the kids are not going to fix it.
Yeah.
But it adds, having a child with someone and, kind of building a family and building like a legacy. I think people who don't have kids, well, we don't have kids right now. Like,
right.
Maybe don't listen to me or something, but
yeah, that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, we're kids. I haven't had kids. So
haven't you?
I don't think so. Actually,
you don't think so?
Are you sure about that?
10 years later.
But I feel like people who don't have kids, they don't realize. Like once you do have a kid, I feel like whenever you're looking at literally the kid after you've given birth, you kind of realize. like you kind of realize what you've created, and it's kind of like a beautiful thing to like have a kid. I'm sure. I'm also the last child, so I should not be talking about.
And also, I don't know that women are
seen-
going to be happy that you're claiming to have created it.
Well, okay. Don't listen to me. I'm the last child. I've never seen a baby being born.
Oh, that's true.
So maybe
Played a
when
small part, maybe.
Yeah.
I was the baby that was born.
Yeah.
Weren't we all? I guess.
So, and then the other thing I think about is it might be nice to not have kids in the short term, and that's what everyone's thinking of. But what happens when you're 60, 70 years old, or even past your 20s, you've had your fun without any responsibilities? Then what? Like, won't you get tired of that? And then when you should be a grandparent, you're not going to have any grandchildren to come over to your house with. And I mean, it goes down to who's going to be at your funeral when you who's going to be. It's always, I was thinking about this when I went to a funeral a couple months or years ago. It's all the person's children and grandchildren that are talking about who this person meant to them. And do you have any of those people? It would have to just be siblings. Your parents would probably be gone by then, and it would, like, the alternative is just to put all your time into your niece and nephews and your friends.
Yeah.
But that's something to think about.
I mean, yeah, no, definitely. Like for my grandparents, at least, like whenever I call them, the first thing they ask is like, "When are you guys coming back? Like home?"
Right.
Like that's their only like kind of like I wouldn't say goal, but their expectations is to see the grandchildren again. Because what else are they gonna do at that age of 70, 80? You know, sitting there alone, right? So I think that's definitely a aspect of why you'd want to have kids. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have kids, less people are gonna miss you, I guess.
Yeah.
There's literally less people. Like that, what you said, like your parents are gonna be gone. That kind of hit me, bro. I was thinking,
Yeah, right.
Hey, Mom and Dad, if you're watching this, bro, I love you, bro. But, like, you know,
Me
it's
too.
like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of sad, actually.
So, but the counter that we started getting into is it doesn't mean people won't have anyone in their life. Like, you can be super involved in your communities with inside your city, volunteering or being part of different groups. And then I guess I'm not very aware of religious communities is a big one for sure. And you can have niece and nephews, be a godparent, or just like put all your time into your friends. But then what happens when your friends are spending all their time with their
Kids,
children and
yeah.
you don't have the children to relate to them? I don't know.
I mean, obviously, you know, there's to talk about the other side. There's definitely people who can live with that don't think that that's a
There's
huge deal. Yeah.
Many people, I saw so many in the YouTube comments
Yeah.
that said they're however many years old and they've never regretted their decision to
Yeah,
not have
exactly.
kids, so.
There's obviously the other side to that, and again, it just comes down towards obviously, like at least right now, the majority want children, but if somehow you can live without it, I mean, it's your lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
The only thing why we're discussing this as a thing which goes into the next topic, or that are people morally obligated to have children, is that advancing the population. That's the only reason why you'd have to say that everybody needs to have children. Other than that, I don't
Right, but there is on the individual basis, like for people's own good, like you do want them, like I feel like there is so much messaging about not having children these days,
Mhm.
and that's where the trend is going. So I feel bad for people that maybe they don't have a good relationship with their parents and they don't have grandparents.
Right.
They don't understand all the benefits, and then they end up regretting their decision in one of the most important parts of so many people's life.
Yeah.
So that's the reason. But as far as saying everybody needs to have children,
right?
you're right. It's based on population.
Yeah.
So we already talked about all the stats with that. Does that give a reason to say people are morally obligated to have children?
Yeah, don't think so. Like, you can't force everybody in a community or a collective. I mean, even if it's a positive, right? That you're like acting, you're not in your free will at that point, right? Like if the government forces you to have children, like, I mean, that's just like animals, for example, right? We're forcing them to reproduce, right? I mean,
I wouldn't.
To an extent.
Hopefully the government wouldn't be forcing people, but maybe should we be shaming people who don't have...
Well,
no, definitely not.
Like,
I don't think we're at that
maybe you
point.
should focus
Yeah,
on
we're
the
not there.
morally part, because what do we mean by morally? Like
Well, luckily we spent a whole episode on this.
Yeah,
We
we did.
So, if
So, like
you-
in this question, are people morally obligated to have children?
Well, before that, I watched the last episode, but
Are we talking about like
you're choosing not to advance the society or the
Based
population.
on a utilitarian point of view, if you want to maximize good for the most amount of people, then you want to bring in more people to the world to experience that, and also like thinking about the consequences for the people that are already here. It's your obligation to make their lives better as well. So that kind of goes into I saw this one video where someone was saying it's actually super selfish to have children because you're bringing them into this crazy, cruel world that's going to collapse due to climate change. Doesn't have to even go that far. Just it's a cruel world full of suffering. So people that choose, even if they want children, to not have children, they're actually the most selfless people. So
Yeah, no, that's definitely makes sense. But I think I'm confident enough in my abilities to maybe protect my children or shield them from stuff that, I mean, I'm fine with having children and bringing them into the world. But
I think part of the argument is like adopting children. So you're making someone's life better that's already here. You're making someone's life better that's already here, rather than bringing other people into this world.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel I don't like. I actually don't agree with that at all. That like some people say that we're bringing like it's selfish to bring a child in. I feel like it's like we're at a point in our history. Like this is our peak. We're peaking right now. This is the best we're gonna. We're at our best right now.
Okay.
50 years ago or 60 years ago, 100 years ago, like some people didn't have rights. Like,
Right.
so that's another conversation. So I actually don't even agree with that entire thing of like our world.
I think they're
is
talking
going-
about the future where like
but
they're more afraid of that.
That's another conversation.
I agree. Like I'm personally, I don't look. I don't think that.
I don't even think the world is suffering like that. But that's
That's a different conversation. But yeah, no, that makes sense.
Well, yeah, like think about how many people you know that say that they would rather have never been born than to be in this world right now. I mean, I'd say very few. And if you know someone like that, that's a big concern.
Help them out.
Yeah, you should help them out.
Please.
I disagree with the idea that non-identity is better than the suffering. Like I would actually say maybe non-identity, non-existence is worse than any amount of suffering. That
give someone the opportunity to live.
Especially today when think about all the many generations that people have been having kids. Times were way harder thousands of years ago than they are right now.
Or even like hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
So
no, I think again, like a recurring theme throughout this is there's fear. People are really afraid of what's going to happen next, so they don't, go into a marriage or they don't have kids. Or I think I like to live in the possibility where I'm not really afraid. I try not to be afraid of everything in the world, right? Because
optimistic.
Yeah, I'm more optimistic, because if you live fearing, like, are you really even living? That's my thing to that. But yeah,
and it all just depends on people's worldview and how optimistic or pessimistic they are. And yeah, I don't think it's that rational to think that you're doing someone a harm by bringing them into this world in the state that it is right now. That's not a rational worldview, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think that's about it for that. I think this might be the last topic.
Yes.
Dual income, no children, couple, DINKs. Funny acronym, but it's funny. Going back to your dad, we have a lot of topics with him. Shout out to your dad, honestly.
Sentences when we
it was good. He basically did say that imagine you're living with no children. and you go out with the lifestyle of parties or like you're having fun, how long are you able to sustain that, right? Like you're gonna get bored at some point. Obviously he's married, it's his point of view, but it's obviously respectable because he has experience. Like how long are you gonna do the same thing? You go to work, come back, have fun, go to party. Like you're gonna be repeating that every day without nothing new happening. You don't have children to care for. Yes, the dual income is great and you can spend on everything, but how long is it sustainable is the question.
I think was good. There's a feeling that these couples are just being so materialistic and superficial. All they care about when they're bragging on TikTok is they're talking about all the things that they can have and all the stuff that they can do. It's normally like going out to dinner and like spending so much time with their dogs and like, okay, but how long is that going to last? And I guess people, so I mean,
the problem is, right, for us, obviously our example would be that it always comes down to like we like experiencing things with children and all that stuff, but maybe they like their dogs, they're chilling with the dogs, they think that's enough for them, right? It's hard to make a concrete split between right and wrong there, you know what I mean?
I think it's important for young people that are making these decisions today to think about the long term and not think about so short term. And then also, it's important for your reason for not having kids to not just be for materialistic purposes. I think like lots of people do have very valid reasons for not wanting kids. Some people aren't able to have kids. But if your reason is because you want more things, then I would say that that's not the wisest decision, because I don't think that joy that you get from material things will last. But I mean, other people could be, after hearing that, say that I'm wrong and they can entertain themselves for their whole life without any issue. I do have another quote.
Okay.
By George Bernard Shaw. Hell is a place where you have nothing to do but amuse yourself.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of the concern that people have with these couples, is that they're not understanding what actually makes life fulfilling. But once again, it's up to them to ultimately decide.
In a series that I watched, I'm pretty sure a lot of people, maybe not you guys, but in Grey's Anatomy, there's this doctor, a female doctor who didn't want kids. Like her friend had kids, so she's like kind of the aunt figure, right? She's going around having fun with the kids, being very like adorable with them. And then her boyfriend, who she told at first stuff that I don't want to have kids at all, right? He comes and asks her, like, you're having so much fun with your so-called nieces and stuff. Why do you not want children of your own? But her explanation would be that even I don't want that responsibility on myself, because I want to focus on my career. I love kids, but I just don't want kids myself. So people have different reasonings to it, right?
Some people do find a lot more fulfillment in their career than they think they would get from kids.
Yeah.
And there's probably a bit of a gender divide with that too.
Yeah.
Although that could be collapsing for better or for worse. Another thing Jordan Peterson likes to say is that we're telling lies to women as a society that they should be intensely focused on their career for their as they go into their 20s, and that's where they're going to get meaning from, is from working on their career. And I think that's where you get some of the differences between men and women, is that men are more ambitious and comfortable being competitive and working 80 hours a week in the workplace to advance their career. And then women might be trying to be men, and then they get to a point where they realize that they should have been spending time with a family. But we're all guys here, so we can't speak
to that. Yeah,
that's just a conservative talking point. So
I think one last thing to add on the dual income, no family or whatever thing it was.
No children, yeah.
No children, yeah. Whenever you do die, or if their entire thing is to, be materialistic, when you die, the money doesn't go in your grave.
Yeah.
But like your children are still in this world if you have children. But if you're a dink, that seems like a really bad word.
It's weird.
They call themselves. They're proud
If
of
you're
it.
a dink, then whenever you do die, you're not leaving anything behind. So there's two types of people in the world where, whenever they do die, they're leaving a legacy behind, children behind to carry their name forward. And the other part is actually I have a quote from one of the smartest people alive. It's Drake.
I don't know if
He said in one of his poems, he said,
poems.
It's a song.
Yeah.
He said, in the next life, I'm trying to stay paid. When I die, put my money in the grave.
Bars.
Man. That's bars.
So then maybe he has an emphasis on, his riches and his money and stuff.
But he has a
can
kid,
put
but
all the gold in your grave and stuff like that.
yeah, it's hard in all these topics because it's so subjective, and like we can make an argument for it to be maybe objective, but it ends up being subjective. Like you can't say what is right or wrong because these are personal decisions for these people, and what works for us might not work for them. Obviously, for us as a society, maybe something's good, but I don't necessarily always have to follow that. But yeah. Is that about it?
Yeah, I don't think any of us are advocating for government mandating people to have children or like limiting the types of relationships that people can be in.
I also just want to add that a lot of the stuff that we've said, we've tried to include both sides in most of it and hope we've done a good job at that. But obviously, we don't have any female perspective with us, so maybe not a lot of stuff is from their point of view. We've tried to incorporate it, but that was the best we could do. Now, if you guys have anything else to add on that, leave it in the comments or honestly search it up yourself.
What?
Yeah, if you don't
do more research.
Yeah, do more
you are interested.
research. If
that's what you meant. Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of want to end on a quote, like a very
Another one.
quote. Well, this has been,
we are pulling out the quotes.
Yeah.
Side, and I just want to end it on a quote with one of arguably smarter than Drake.
Oh.
And this, I'm being serious. Michael Scott from The Office said,
Goat.
Webster's dictionary defines wedding as the fusing of two metals with a hot torch.
Okay.
And we're all gold medals here, so
Okay.
yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to add.
I think that wraps it up.
Okay.
That was good. Are we ending it off with our own
I'm Hussein.
thoughts? No, thoughts about this to wrap it up? Are we good?
If my future wife is watching this, my Instagram is in the description.
Nice. Do you think you
Send a
made a
DM.
good impression for her?
Yeah.
No, I think you did. He was very lovey-dovey and philosophical this one.
You would hope that our future wives would agree with us on everything we're talking about in this episode specifically.
Yeah. Hopefully. Shout out to Carson's dad again for a bunch of the codes. He's a respectable viewer. He's
he is
honestly,
one of our most committed viewers.
Maybe one of our only viewers at this point. But yeah, to wrap it up, thank you guys for watching. Everything's in the description. Follow us somewhere, everywhere. Subscribe, please. Peace out. Thank you.